Welcome to New Society, and I am your host, Carlo Jean-Michel. About a month ago, I got a reel sent to me talking about knowing the difference between destiny versus intensity. And I immediately said, this is a really powerful post, but it's also really dangerous because if you're fighting against your destiny, it's just going to look like intensity. And he said, you should make a post about it. So here we are. The reel started off saying that intensity is essentially unresolved shadow meeting unresolved shadow. So if you're a person who has yet to be in your first relationship, or you've been in a series of them and you're waiting for your person and you're trying to do things differently, or you're trying to hold out, that's what you're missing. You don't even understand how in great of a spot you are, meaning everyone's unresolved. So many people are walking around with these U-Hauls full of trauma, bringing them from one relationship to another, not realizing that trauma bonding is really intense. We've all been through it. We've all experienced our own version of it. And it's really easy to connect on things that you vibe with, obviously. Here's the thing. It's like a firework. It's hot and heavy, grand spectacle, and then it fizzles out. Versus what I understand to be destiny. The best example I've ever heard of destiny is in regards to relationships, at least. Although this applies to everything. This applies to career. This applies to friendship. This applies to ambition. This applies to life purpose. Whatever it is, so many things fall under this umbrella. Everything falls under this umbrella, essentially. Sorry, there's a lot in my head, and I've recorded this a few times, so bear with me as I through everything. So in regards to relationships, you expect, again, for there to be these fireworks and this grand spectacle, which can happen depending on the circumstances, of course. However, I heard a long time ago there's a lot in my head, that when it's destiny, it's soft, it's subtle. It's almost unannounced in the sense that it's easy and it's effortless and it flows. And I believe that the intensity part of it is that you understand that it's bigger than you, especially with how fluid and how easy and essentially effortless it comes off as. It's like you've known each other for forever. It's like the sun somehow shines brighter and a breeze just feels even better on a warm day, or you wake up and you're just excited to get started, and it feels like it's something bigger than you. So to answer the question, how do you know whether it's destiny or intensity? A, it's easy, and it's almost not doing it for show. And the other is, I just had it. I wrote it down. And of course, my laptop's about to die. The first one is, the second one is that you don't stand in the same place for very long. It propels you forward. If you've ever attempted to do something and it just flows and it's easy and it's as if doors are opening without you even having to knock on them, or just paths align and all of a sudden you're in the middle of this co-creation with you plus one, or if it's career, other people, whatever it is, it propels you forward. It leaves you better than it found you. How long does this last? Essentially, it's up to you. Isn't that what Neo and the Oracle was all about? Isn't that what that first conversation in the first Matrix movie was all about, where he goes in asking her, am I the one? And she says, you tell me. It's up to you. I might contradict myself, hopefully I don't, but we expect miracles, we expect divinity, we expect to be spoken to in these big grandiose gestures, angels trumpeting down from heaven, a thunderstorm that synchronizes perfectly with whatever's going on in your situation, We expect these, and myself included. However, the same way that it shows up almost unannounced is the same way that destiny whispers. It doesn't need to yell. It has no. It's not grandiose. It exists to keep momentum going. At least the way that I understand it, and it's up to you. And so this is where this whole post is all comes full circle. Excuse me. Bottom line, in regards to relationships specifically, the person you end up with will be the most difficult relationship of your life. Is that a hard and fast rule, or like a consistent rule? Not necessarily. However, you will be tested. One of my favorite quotes is, to love someone long term is to attend 1,000 funerals of the person they used to be. That's evolution. That's progression. That's trial and error. That's death and rebirth. Remember, for some who don't know this, every 7 years on a cellular level, your body completely regenerates. So from 7 years from now, you're not going to be the same person you are in this moment, watching this video, whenever you come across it. And that's by design. Abraham Hicks talks about how when you go to bed at night, the energy, the momentum of the day dissipates. It stops. And as you sleep, as you regenerate, as you recharge, the next day, all that momentum is waiting on you to come into your experience. So you decide how it goes. And so often we're the ones who bring our trauma, that U-Haul, we're the ones who bring that into it. So where am I going with this? I feel like I'm all over the place. I'm also trying to keep this really short. Where am I going with this? When it starts off and it's soft and it's effortless and it's easy and it's bigger than you, but it's all about you, and it's all about this person, and it's all about the connection, and it's all about it being divine, and it's all about it being bigger than you. The moment you see that start to change, pause and just pay attention. Whenever I'm in conflict, the very first thing I do is figure out how I contributed to it. I'm not here for conflict. I'm not here for chaos. I'm not here to argue with you. I'm not here for anything that takes me out of my experience. Is it going to happen? Of course it does. It happens all the time. Do I cause it sometimes? Yes. Is it on purpose? Never. Well, no, never. I'm a very honest person. I just want to make sure that's the case. No, it's ever on purpose. Okay, so how often do we do that? How often are you in a situation? How often does something happen and you're trying to pick up the pieces? And how often do you not focus on the other person, not focus on what they did? In the context of the situation, yes, you want to look at the bigger picture. However, how often do you stop and say, I could have handled that better. I could have said that better. I could have waited a minute longer. I could have remembered that I'm being taught right now. This is actually to me in real time. I'm being taught by this beautiful example that not everything requires a conversation. And the amount of stress that doesn't exist in my shoulders on a consistent basis, I'm still getting used to it, because it requires, again, I'm trying not to go on too many side quests that don't focus on the main point, which is destiny versus intensity. Slow down. If you know that, well, from my perspective, see, this is where I get tripped up, because I always try to present things a certain way and it's not always necessary. If you are in a situation that you enjoy, that leaves you better than it found you. And by that, I mean, let's say you want to stop partying as much. You're at a point in your life where you're starting to think about your life purpose. You're starting to think about what you're here for. You're starting to think about your legacy, what you want to leave behind, what you want to put all of your energy into. Maybe you're thinking about it before now. And all of a sudden you meet a person who is very different from everyone you've ever met, in whatever context it is, to the point where they're meeting your friends and they don't really vibe. And you're noticing that you don't really care. Not necessarily because, oh, I care about this person more than I care about my friends who have been with me from the beginning, but in the sense that you've been on this mental trajectory where you're starting to think about other things that may be beyond. I want to be very clear. Friendship is so incredibly important to me, and I'll actually come around full circle in regards to relationships and how I see that all playing out. However, where I'm going with this is, let's say, Friday, Saturday nights are usually keggers. They're usually bar hopping. They're usually parties. They're usually whatever it is, and you're realizing that, you know what, that was really so much fun. The memories were incredible. I'm here for it in the future, a lot more sporadically. But at this stage of the game, my priorities have shifted to what you may not even be sure, but something's happening. You know that you're in a state of flux. And in situations like that, the best thing you can do is just allow it. Just pay attention. Just sit back a little bit and zoom out and just observe what's going on. So I started doing that. It happened to me very randomly in college. It was the first time I smoked weed, and it was the most incredible. Like, it was one of those, cliche out of body experiences. I remember floating over I'm a very sensitive person, like just my central nervous system. It's just, like the just noticeable difference is really low, all the things. And, there's a book about it, The Highly Sensitive Person, et cetera, et cetera. And so, things that affect people, let's say there's a normal reaction. The reaction for me, sometimes, not always, is dialed up. Sometimes a little bit, sometimes a lot. And yeah, I just I'd never done it before. I don't even think I smoked a lot. I think it was like 2 hits. And I just remember we were camping, and I just remember hovering over the bonfire. And school for me has always been really tough. Dyslexia, ADD, neurodivergence, although I haven't been tested for that yet. But I've had that conversation a lot with my therapist and former therapist. And I just had these goals that I wanted to do. I had a list of things. I'm not going to get into the detail of what they were, but I just remember that I had these goals. And I want to say that it started probably around sophomore year of high school. And I went to Northeastern, which is a 5-year school. So it was Midler year, which is the 3rd year. And all of a sudden, I thought I had miles to go before I sleep, just because, goals are big, and they're like mountains, and I just had this notion in my head that I had miles to go and I just had so much more to do. And in that moment, I kind of paused, and I was like, not to say that I actually achieved all of my goals, but I was in a different place. I started at the bottom, and I wasn't at the bottom anymore. I wasn't necessarily, it doesn't matter that I was at the top. That wasn't the point. It was more of like, whoa, it was that moment where you stop and you turn around and you look behind you and you're like, how did I already drive this many miles or whatever it is? And it was the most, again, that feeling of like stress leaving your shoulders. It was like that. And the whole point of this entire post is, how often do we fight against that? How often do we meet someone where things are amazing and it's working out awesome, and all of a sudden you get triggered? They say something that all of a sudden you're with your ex, or you're in a childhood memory, or this one friend who just irritates you, whatever it is, and you're triggered, and it's such a physical reaction to the point where you forget. All of a sudden you're almost detached from the relationship. Like, sorry, again, a lot of thoughts in my head. When that happens, and again, it's par for the course. I remember the first time it happened with a friend. We spent like every waking moment together. Again, this was like middle year, so third year at Northeastern. And then one day I just got so annoyed, and I was so fed up. And like she hadn't even done anything. I just think we had spent like every single day together for like however long, and it just got on my nerves. And every time that happened in reverse, I always took it so personally because I'm so big on not pissing people off on purpose and not being a nuisance and not being a pain in the ass. And, since then I learned that to a point that's beyond your control, all you can do is be cognizant of how you're contributing to a situation and just be, tuned into the room and, whatnot. But that moment when she pissed me off, I just remember it was like, I get over things very quickly, so it probably lasted for less than, I don't know, a few hours, like, or a couple days. But I know that's a big jump. But again, I'm there's more that I want to say before this video wraps. And that was the first time it happened, and it didn't hit me until years later. But that's normal. That happens. And we don't factor that in enough. All of a sudden, at some point, our partner becomes our opponent. And it's like this battle. And don't get me wrong, it's not a one-sided thing. Both sides contribute. I'm an enabler. I didn't know that until I knew that. And so I work really hard to not enable, but it happens. And especially because no relationship is the same. One of the best pieces of advice that I heard from my first therapist was, it's up to you and your partner to define your relationship. So with that said, there's no rule book, which is why I'm pausing a lot and why I'm making sure that my words are, that as best as I can, I'm trying not to say certain things, simply because there's no rule book. There's no one method. There's no one secret. There's no one answer. It's person specific. There's no one else like you. The odds are 400 trillion to 1 that you were born, let alone what happened from then to now. And Jim Carrey is quoted from years ago saying that average is an epidemic. No, is it? No, that's not. That was Grant Cardone. Said average is an epidemic. And I could not agree more. Average is statistics. That's all it is. It's just statistics. It's just taking a measurement of whatever it is. And it's just looking at the numbers. There's average, and then there's above average, and then there's below average, and then there's everything in between. And somewhere along the way, we forgot that wasn't the goal. I remember the first time one of the times I got off dating apps. I haven't been on them in forever. I remember feeling like I was just sick and tired of looking at the profiles because they were all the same. And I contributed to this as well. I wasn't the expert. I tried to be, but in my own way, or I tried to color outside of the box. But again, so much of what we experience today is unprecedented. We've never experienced this before. So where I'm going with this is, it all comes back to you. The better you know yourself, the more resolved your shadow is. And this is a work in progress. I'm almost convinced that there's no way that you can ever resolve all of your trauma in a lifetime, simply because of the ego and vibration and the way that it works. Like, there are monks, for example, who have resolved their shadow. They literally, this is not an exaggeration, they have to sit in meditation, focused on their breathing, connecting to something outside of what's going on in pop culture and the world at present, simply because they've resolved their shadow so much that they vibrate so high that they don't have the luxury of interacting with the outside world anymore. Like, the Western world would send them into psychosis. And the fact that they're sitting in meditation at this stage of the game, most things would send them into psychosis or some variation of it. And all that to say, if you're here in this lifetime and you can interact with the physical world, you have an ego. That's just how it works. You have an ego. To dissolve it means that you vibrate so high that there's a disconnection between the physical world and the frequency that you're vibrating at. That's just the science of it, as best as I understand it, which is very little. So, destiny versus intensity, very important distinction and the key to so many things. However, the key to the key is know thyself. The better you know yourself, the better you'll be able to distinguish between fireworks and soft, easy, effortless, something that feels bigger than you. And to say that it's easy and effortless, again, words are so important, and I want to make sure that I present this the right way. Words are so important in this. Oh, sorry, that's not what I want to say. Know thyself. The better you understand who you are, even if it's a work in progress, even if you still aren't a fan of a lot of the things about you, know thyself. Know who you are. Know how you operate. Know what. For a while, I gave the book, The 5 Love Languages, as a wedding gift, just because I considered it the Bible of relationships, just because it's so good. And there's actually a lesson in there that I want to circle back to. Oh, I also have to circle back to the friendship and how it applies to relationships, romantic relationships. And the book, and I thought it was amazing. You know, everyone has a love language and a love tank, and when it's full, things are great. When it's not full, things are not great. And it's up to the partner to know how to fill it, essentially, simply because we all have our needs. And when you're with your life partner, it's just par for the course. And so, where am I going with this? Conflict, your conflict language. I think I heard that once or twice in the last decade about, you know, how do you fight? Where we all know what we spend so much time focusing on what we require to be at peace, at homeostasis, to be happy, etc. Or whatever. I'm going to pause there and just keep going. However, how are you when you're triggered? That moment that happens for the first time, how are you going to react? How are you going to respond? And this is when we start fighting against the destiny. That's it. That's where it lives. Because all of a sudden, again, they go from your partner to your opponent, and it's not even intended. Do you know who you date? You're not dating the person in front of you. You're dating their trauma. You're dating their childhood. That's why it's the hardest relationship of your life. Because as far as you're concerned, you're fighting over the dishes or the car or whatever arbitrary thing. And to them, they're 8 years old, and some horrific thing that they're still carrying is all they see right now. And it's so difficult to navigate when you're not used to it, because so much of this is unprecedented. See how many times I'm saying that? Unprecedented, unprecedented, unprecedented. And I'm saying that because what if when you quiet everything out here enough to tune into what's going on in here and tune into how, you know, God, the universe whispers. This is where meditation lives. This is where intentional breathing lives. This is where plant medicine lives, as far in a medicinal context. And it's all to get you back to basics. I just watched this awesome, listened to this awesome audio of a near-death experience, and it just talked about so many things, going back to basics and what matters, and how we're vibrational beings having a physical experience, and how so many things are analogies and euphemisms and not to be taken literally. But one of the quotes was how truth, I wrote it down. My laptop's dead, and my other device is not turned on. That's okay. friendship. I wanted to get back to that. I believe that our relationships in our lives are practice for love. I believe that our family is practice for friendship. I believe that friendship is practice for romantic relationships. I believe romantic relationships are practice for marriage. I believe that marriage, if you decide to have a family, is practice for children. But that's not, I'm not as sold on that as I'd like to be. And essentially, I believe marriage prepares you for the long haul. If you're the kind of person who wants connection, who wants intimacy, who wants it to be real, who wants it to do all of the things, challenge you, redefine you, give you peace, give you patience, better understand yourself, all of the things, there's only one way to do it. And it's with one foot in front of the other and just seeing how it goes and being completely honest the entire time. It's a surrender. In one of the other recordings, I was talking about how, when it feels like destiny, you're swimming with the current. And when you're fighting against it, you all of a sudden turn around and you start swimming against it. I hope I said that right. Because when it's destiny, you're swimming with, and when it's not, you're fighting against. And why would you do that? What are you trying to avoid? And if you are you fighting a losing battle? Because fighting against the current is like trying to run up an escalator. It's really difficult to do. And if you misstep, there are consequences that are not fun. And so why? And these are rhetorical questions. I speak to myself. I'm my number one client, and I usually say this at the end. Maybe this is the end. Let's see. But take what works and leave what doesn't. I'm an expert in me. The only thing I know for sure is how much I don't know. And I'm becoming an expert in me. So much of this insight, so much of this clarity, so much of the conversation, so much of the value that I'm able to bring to my clients, this is all new. And it's because I started quieting this and started tuning out all of this so that I can start listening to this. Because this and this are connected, but contrary to popular modern day belief, this is the leader, not this. However, this is vitally important, and I'm not trying to downplay that. However, this is what matters. And it's scary because it's essentially at the core, quite literally, of who we are. And that's why it's scary. And that's why people are afraid. And that's why they freak out. And that's why they'd rather deal with unresolved shadow, meeting unresolved shadow, than having the courage to surrender to destiny. Because that's the cost. That's what it takes. It's a surrender. It's to say, I don't know all the answers. It's to say, I'm not perfect. And I'm afraid that you're going to leave once you figure that out. It's to say, I love you so much that the thought of you not being here, I don't know if I could survive that. It doesn't have to go anywhere. It's just an honesty. It's just a vulnerability. It's to say, I trust you enough to tell you this. I trust you enough to do this with you the right way. I trust you enough to be present with you as we figure this out. Those words are transformative. Because you know how often people hear it? Not often enough. Not even close. And can you tell how passionate I am about this? And it's simply because once you figure it out, and it's not going to be the way that you think it is, it changes everything. And even the hard stuff you can carry because you understand. And my advice is to find that person. And if I haven't addressed this yet, how long it lasts, that's up to you. That's entirely up to you. It can last a year. It can last a lifetime. And by you, I mean both of you. Are there parameters that they need to watch out for? Of course. This is where non-negotiables live. As long as your boundaries aren't crossed, you're good. And Expect your boundaries to shift. Expect them to change. Expect a lot of the ones that you had before to be not nearly as serious as you thought they were. Expect the opposite, things that you would never consider to all of a sudden vitally important. Expect all of that simply because that's what we're dealing with. When it's destiny, it's bigger than you. Trust that it's bigger than you. And if you allow yourself to surrender to it, you'll get all the answers you need to know when you need to know them. Another last thing that I'm going to leave you with, when it's destiny, you can't screw it up. You can't. You can't. Categorically, you can't. As long as you allow yourself to surrender, and as long as that person is willing to meet you, you can't. Take what works, leave what doesn't.